welcome to another wonderful SEMrush webinar. We are live, apparently. We're live with Catherine and John. This is going to be absolutely awesome. Welcome to everybody in the audience. Apparently, we've got some people from the Shetland Islands, from New York. I'm in Paris, right next door to John. Interestingly enough, I can pretty much look out of my window and wave to John.
It's a slight exaggeration, but we're close by.
Very close by, in the 12th arrondissement in Paris. So welcome John H, who's saying hello to us. It's wonderful to be here. We're going to be talking today about digitalizing your offer in a time of crisis, how to engage and personalize your audience. And as you can see, I just read that off the screen next to me rather than bothering to remember it. Somebody from Denver, Colorado, it must be early in the morning for you. In Turkey, it must be slightly later, so you must be starting your evening and probably having your aperitif, as we say in France. So welcome, Catherine, welcome, John. Before starting, just to remind everybody, this will be available to watch again on YouTube. That's absolutely fine. If you don't manage to catch everything as you watch it the first time, you can always re-watch it. We have questions at the end, so please do pop your questions into the YouTube chat. We love answering questions from other people. I'm speaking actually in the royal we because I actually mean Catherine and John because I don't know much about this topic. John, tell me a little bit about yourself.
My name is John Hughes. Yes, I am a neighbor of Jason. I work for a company which is called Plezi. Plezi is a marketing automation software. So we work with a lot of different B2B companies, whether it's SaaS, whether it's fintech, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's engineering. What they've all got in common is most of them are doing some sort of inbound marketing strategy. Most of them are doing some sort of content marketing strategy. And our tool helps people basically generate traffic, generate lead, nurture those leads, and helps them to become customers.
Which is wonderful. And I think what's going to be really nice today is we're going to be talking about the audience, and we're going to be talking about content, and we're going to be talking about marketing, and we're not going to be talking about tech, which is really groovy. I think this is going to be a nice relief for a lot of people. Catherine, how about you? I know you do lots of copywriting and you're in somewhere that isn't Paris.
That's true. Yeah, we're based up in Scotland. So hi, Jason. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here. So I'm Catherine Strachan. I'm managing director of Coffee House. Coffee House is a content marketing agency specializing in technology and fintech. So we work with some brands doing some really exciting things, everything from biometric technology at airports to AR for carpenters and home repairs. Yeah,
brilliant. Sorry, I actually had a doubt. As I was saying it, I recognize your accent, which isn't from Scotland, but you are in Scotland. And as I was saying it, I suddenly had a doubt. But you're American or Canadian?
No, I'm originally from America, but I'm based up in Scotland. I've been in the UK for 7 years now. So I got my British citizenship in September, which was really exciting. So I'm both now, half and half, which is great.
Brilliant. That's wonderful. Now, you said it's sunny where you are. I'd like everyone in the audience to tell us if it's sunny where you are, because in Paris, it's sunny too. And it's the start of summer. We're all happy. Everybody's got a big smile on their face. And I think we're probably ready to get started with John. I think I suddenly realize I sound like I'm speaking to a children's TV show, and I do apologize. Let's get back on track with something more serious. Audiences, content, marketing, digitalizing your offer in a time of crisis, how to engage and personalize your audience with John, who's going to be speaking for 20 minutes, followed by questions from the audience and a panel discussion. So please share your screen, John, and we're off. I'll leave it with you.
Thank you very much, Jason. So yeah, as Jason said, I'm going to sort of talk through the theme that we're talking about today, and then certainly I'm really interested to hear Catherine's input, particularly when it comes to content and different types of content you can use to personalize. So don't hesitate, everybody who's in with us, to leave any comments or any questions. I'm sure we're going to get to them all. We want this to be a conversation rather than just a presentation, but I'm here really to kick off the idea of personalization, particularly in B2B marketing. And it's something that I think people have talked about for a long, long time, but it also feels to me like it's really been a strong voice that came in at the beginning of the year. And I think, I hate to say it, but partly due to the dreaded lockdown and the pressure that's caused for everybody, but also this idea of working from home and the difficulty of separating our working selves from our actual selves, that seemed to usher in a lot of voices who were asking for B2B marketing to become more human, to speak with maybe a less formal voice, with a more direct voice, but also to create real engagement with prospective customers by personalizing our marketing. Now, these are easy things to say, but if you do already have some sort of lead generation going on your website, to be able to understand who your lead is, why they're there, what they're looking for, and to be able to speak directly to that person, it's extremely complicated. What's more, a lot can depend on what kind of business you're in, what kind of sector you're in, how many different segmentations you have, how many different personas you have, how many different offers you have on your website. So it can become more complex depending on the type of offer you have. What I'm going to try and do in this webinar is to get into the nitty-gritty of this and to try to find a way that you can make personalization work for you and some practical ways to go about it. So as I said, I work for Plezi. I also do a lot of the marketing for Plezi as well as having my hand speaking to customers and helping them out as well. As I said, Plezi is a marketing automation software which basically helps with all of these things that we're talking about, whether it's content marketing, whether it's inbound marketing, whether it's getting more presence to your site, whether it's creating leads, whether it's generating leads, whether it's lead nurturing. And we work with a wide range of different customers that are looking for this kind of voice. Let's start with this idea of personalization, because a lot of people talk about it as a B2B marketer in reference to B2C. And a lot of B2B marketers find personalization harder than B2C does. First of all, the B2C journey is not the same as in B2B. It's much more emotional. It can be based on impulse. There are less decision makers involved. And secondly, in a survey conducted by Marketing Charts, 52% of people said that in B2B, it was harder to reach out to decision makers or their target market, right? Now, let's talk about inbound marketing. Sorry, I'm a little lost on my way. Yes, because I want to go back to this idea a little bit. There's a lot of sense that with B2B next to B2C, the buying funnel isn't the same. There aren't so many decision makers. It often depends on the product and so on and so forth. Here's the thing that I would argue when it comes to this sort of B2B and B2C case. It's over 20 years ago that everyone got really surprised about Amazon. If you ordered something off Amazon, then they really know our taste, and we said, oh, it's really clever. Back in the days when you used to buy those things called books and CDs. But is B2C really that great at sort of doing like a seamless personalization? I'd actually argue that B2C a lot of the time can be pretty blunt and not half as clever as it likes to think it is. Now, we all know that social media is really good at knowing what we want, and they've got a huge load of data in there. But retargeting is a great case in point where personalization is not really there. It's actually something nagging you about getting something you don't really need. Retargeting has its place. It can be really effective, but is it personalization, or is it just kind of a blunt way of kind of pushing you and pushing you? I'm talking about personalization for both, for B2B and B2C, in terms of personal messages, which I don't think you necessarily always get from retail. It's not very often where you get something where you think they know who I am. What we're looking for when we're talking about personalization is we're looking for something that is not about kind of buzzwords or algorithms or artificial intelligence. It's really this basic idea that if I ordered some shoes from an online clothes retailer, that the messages that they sent to me after that shouldn't be trying to sell me dresses, right? take it wider than that idea. Think about something like Netflix, which everybody says is so amazing in terms of knowing who you are. But if you really look at Netflix, they only push big shows at you that everyone watches, and they do a certain amount of personalization in there, but it's not particularly sophisticated. And I think to a certain extent they do that on purpose, but it's not really personalized for you. Something like YouTube has got personalization down, and we can spend hours going down a rabbit hole as they keep suggesting things that we're going to like. It's a pet peeve of mine, but it is important when we talk about seamless B2B channels. Now, that is a digression to some extent, or just me moaning about it, but it shows that if we can do something in B2B where we can understand who our audience are, and we can send them relevant messages, then we can really engage with prospective customers and build our brands. So that takes us to these ideas again. This jealousy from B2B marketers to those in B2C, where I think everyone starts to think to a certain extent that B2C is so much more exciting, and they're free to do whatever they want. That people feel in B2B that their target market is harder to reach. Their decision makers are harder to reach. They often feel, and this is true of many people that I speak to, that unfortunately they're sitting on a whole bunch of bad data. And when I say that, a lot of the time, and I get this with marketers who've just come into a company, and they've got a CRM system there that has a lot of leads, but they've no idea where they came from, who they are, what those people were interested in, or what they are. And the other huge one is budgets. A lot of marketers feel that in B2B, they just don't have the budget that B2C has. So, first of all, when we talk about inbound marketing and how you can use your site to engage with your visitors online, what we want to think about really is the journey that a lead takes in order for us to start thinking about personalization. Now, B2B Marketing Net said that 94% of B2B journeys start online. And I just want to push that point home. I'm sure a lot of people who are here are very familiar with that idea, but I think sometimes we forget that your website is where people come to understand your offer. And as a marketer, it's the most fundamental tool that you have for your company and for your brand. Your website can be used as a way to start engaging those visitors and start creating a relationship, really. And this is at the nub of personalization. If you're creating blog pieces, webinars, white papers, podcasts, whatever it may be, which is creating traffic for your site, then you're probably already writing content that is relevant to your target market. Inbound marketing done well is when that lead magnet becomes a conversation and you're able to take that lead on a journey. And what we see in this graph here is exactly what that journey is, right? We go from discovery to evaluation to purchase and then to retain. And the discovery section is very much when someone's first coming to your site. If they're coming to your site, they probably looked something up on Google. And a lot of the time when they've looked something up, they've not Googled your company name. Actually, what they've Googled is the problem that they've had, or the general words of the things that they're looking for. And that's where your content should focus on actually that lead's issue, not necessarily your product. Now, your website is going to be full of things about your product, but if you've got interesting content that is talking about the issues your target market is interested in, that's how you're going to start to get people coming onto your site and start discovering what you're looking at. If you go one step up into the evaluation part, you're going to be actually using content that is going to help them evaluate their buying criteria, and you're going to start to talk about your product a little bit more. When we get to the purchase part, you're going to help them finalize their decision. So you're going to be doing case studies. You're going to be talking much more product-based, you're going to be giving results, okay? And the journey doesn't stop there, even once they've become a customer. You still need to be sending your clients information about your product, getting their feedback, helping them improve their competence on your product, telling them what your company is doing. It carries on, and all of that content needs to be relevant to them, and you need to understand how you can make it relevant to them. So let me go down a little bit more, and I'm pretty sure Catherine's going to have some interesting things to say about each one of these in terms of what kind of content you can do, because this is what she does every day. But again, in our discovery section, social media is going to bring people to your site. Your blog articles are going to bring people to your site. Your blog articles, if they have the right kind of wording, are going to get you higher up Google, and are going to get people coming through if they've got the problem that your product solves. Once we get onto the evaluation, we're getting on to more kind of high level quality content. I would call anything that is a little bit meatier, something like a white paper, a webinar, a podcast, something that people have to really spend some time and engage with. It means that they're already past that discovery stage, and they're starting to really look at what it is that you do. Once we get further, once we start to take them on that journey, we're going to need to kind of push them and trigger them, and it's going to be through some sort of marketing automation. It's going to be through some sort of workflow where we're starting to convince them as to why it is that they should purchase the product from you. And then we want to delight them. And then we want to, as I said, while we're retaining, we want to be sending them information about what's going on. We want to be sending them information about the product, information about our company, and try and improve all the time about what we're doing. Inbound marketing done well means that your target audience will find you. This is what I'm trying to show with this sort of simplified journey here, because there are more complex versions of it. But whether it's from quality content or whether it's from CEO, the journey you take your leads on has to be personalized. Let's go back to that idea that we had, that it's hard to reach decision makers. That's exactly where your content comes in, because if you can create content that speaks to those decision makers, speaks to those personas, then you are getting through to your target audience. What is personalization? What is personalization not? Personalization is not just getting someone's name or company name in an email. In fact, let's not confuse personalization with this idea, which is really outbound techniques. It's outbound marketing techniques. It can be really useful to certain companies where the more personalized you can get, the more effective the outreach, and there's lots of sophisticated tools and quotes and channels you can use to do that. But outbound marketing is time consuming, it's research heavy, it's cold, and it's an interruption to someone's day. Having some sort of marketing software where you're basically saying, "Hi, John," is not personalization. Personalization is when you're actually sending information to someone that they're interested in, okay? The question is, why and what part of it, okay? What part of what you do are they interested in? As I mentioned before, real personalization involves understanding who somebody is, how they first came to your site, and what it is that they're interested in. So for me, personalization really comes down to segmentation, and we sort of head back to our bad data here. But this is really the heart of personalization in B2B. Now, I speak to lots of people who have, on one hand, they're going to have a paying method, and on the other hand, they've got a subscription method. And I understand there could be lots of different business models within it, which I can't speak to every single one. I have some authority from the different clients we have at Plezi, but I can certainly talk about what we do at Plezi in terms of understanding who our customers are. The key to personalization with inbound is real segmentation. So this means the following: paying attention to where a lead has come from. So have they come in from an event? Have they come in when those things used to happen? From webinars, from gated content, from blog articles, from newsletter signups, from contact forms? For each individual one, there's a different journey, and you need to be able to segment those leads so that the journey they go on is relevant to them. So we want to look at where a lead has come from. So what channel, what sources have they come from? We want to look at what content a lead is looking at. And again, this can be broken down into various different pieces. So is it early stage articles? Are they downloading high quality content? Where are they in that journey, right? Where are they in the buying funnel? So that you can understand what to send to them next based on their maturity as a lead. Not all leads will take the same journey. But the funnel is still a fairly good framework. Some go faster than others. Those that go by the wayside are probably not your target market. Some people go through it very slowly. But what they are looking at, what subject matter, how you can segment them, and what offer they're going to go into is essential. It's vital to what you send next. And so really, if you can segment your audience to understand what content to send next to them, you're basically onto some sort of personalization there. And then the next question is when to contact them. Okay, so where they are in the journey, what their interest is, you need at that point some sort of lead scoring, which is going to tell you when they've hit the end of that when they've hit the purchase part of that funnel, so that somebody from your sales team can start talking to them. At Plezi, for example, we divide leads by subject matter. So someone who's come in through content that is about lead nurturing will be treated differently to a lead that's come in which is talking about SEO or marketing strategies. We can understand the different segmentation there. And if you can segment your audience by subject matter and even by source, you're on your way to be able to define what kind of information to send them to lead them through the funnel so they're ready to go buy. We go back to our trainers and dressers example, but this is massive for those companies that can often have relatively two different audiences coming onto their site and two different offers, and they need to send them off. If your content speaks not only to the interest of someone, but also to their needs, you've got personalization, because they start to trust in you as a brand. They're starting to engage with you, and they look closer at your product if you send them messages which are relevant to them. Now, some of you may be thinking, fine, I need to segment. I need to know where they came from. I need to treat each one differently. I need to do a workflow on some sort of marketing automation platform. But workflows can be really, really complex things. In fact, what a workflow is supposed to do for a marketer is to automate steps to nurture a lead, while the marketer can do something else, which is a lot more fun, like creating content and coming up with marketing strategies. But what it often turns out to be is a very inexact art that's tremendously time consuming. And finally, once those messages are sent out, it could often end up alienating the very lead you want to impress. For example, if you create a workflow 6 months ago and it's still being sent to new leads now, you've got to ask the question to yourself, is it still relevant? Does it reflect your brand now? Has your content changed since you created that workflow? Have your offers changed since you created that workflow? If someone comes in through a webinar last week, for example, and 6 months ago you created a workflow where you said, well, if they go on this, then they're going to go on that, and then if they click here, they're going to go on that. It's extremely complicated, and it's a very, very difficult thing to do and to get right. Workflows have their place. I would say that they're really useful for very simple kind of introductions and messages that you want to send, but the more complex ones, I think it's still quite hard for a lot of marketers to define the exact messages that is going to make somebody really engage in your site. I want to go back to some Plessy examples, right? Because this is what we do with our different leads that come into our website, and how we understand what they're looking at. First of all, we know when someone first came into our site, and we know what attracted them there. We know exactly the reason why they came in. We know the details of what they've been looking at on our website and for how long. But we also have basically a lead scoring there, where we're able to establish how much they're engaging with the different, more high quality content that's on our site. When I say engage, they're downloading it, they're leaving their details in exchange of getting a certain amount of content. We have different tags which basically help us segment. So our content is tagged, our leads are tracked, and once we understand that, we can start to nurture them with the relevant messages. And we don't do that through a workflow. We do it through something called a smart campaign. Now, a smart campaign is basically with the system of the tagging and the system of the scoring. And as you can see here, we've got awareness, evaluation, and purchase. So we've even simplified our funnel even more. But what it means is we can start within certain parameters to send messages and different triggers which are going to be relevant, which we don't have to program or anything like that. We just create certain parameters, and we can see the stats on how people are answering it. We can see how many people are going through those different phases, and we know that each one of those messages that are sent is completely relevant in terms of segmentation, in terms of personalization to that lead. What this really means for a marketer, particularly for those working in a startup or maybe with a small team, perhaps they've already outsourced a large part of their marketing because they have very little time in terms of creating content and so on, is that purpose-driven content that's actually of interest can be sent to your leads automatically without you doing really very much setup at all. Segmentation is key. It's the key to personalization. It's about having data, but it's also about having content to talk to those leads, to take those leads on a journey, as we've been discussing, and content that is relevant to them. Personalization is when a lead basically goes, that's interesting. I was looking at that. Personalization is something that maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, they're going to receive something and go, yeah, I was looking at that before. And they're going to click on it and they're going to come back into your site. If you can start to do that, then you can really start to talk to the leads that you want to speak to. That's pretty much it from me, you guys.
Brilliant stuff. Wonderful. Now, don't forget.
Thank you, Jason.
That was delightful. I've actually already seen it, so I kind of cheated. I knew most of that. That was absolutely awesome. What did you think, Catherine? You enjoyed that, I think?
Yeah, definitely. It resonated with a lot of, how we approach content. And I think it's really interesting in a B2B context, because quite often when you see content for B2B, it's very corporate, it's very flat, it's very dull, it's very rigid. In fact, B2B copywriting gets a bad rep because they forget to personalize. So they don't take the time at the beginning of their journey to build customer avatars. So one of the things that I always say to our clients is, do you have your customer avatars? And that is where we start. That is where we start to create great content. You take the time to understand who these people are. What is it that's keeping them awake at night? What are they worried about? And how can you then position your service or your product to solve that problem? So that resonates with a lot of, what you're saying, John, definitely.
Brilliant. One thing that strikes me, sorry, I'll come back to you in a moment, John, but what you started there was with, I think one thing you're saying is it doesn't have to be bells and whistles and fun and trumpets and balloons in your content. It needs to be appropriate for the person who's reading it or consuming it. So in fact, being relevant will immediately make it interesting and enjoyable and helpful to the person. Is that more or less it?
Yeah, I think you've summed up my 20-minute presentation very, very well. But no, I mean, relevance is, and it sounds like a wide word, but I mean, as I said, we work with companies that will have, as I said, like we'll have a buying model for something, but they'll also have like a subscription model where they're doing learning and so on. And a lot of those times, those companies will do a mass email to all of their contact base, and it's not relevant, and it is under. There's two sides. And I think we should go back to it with Catherine's point, because there is the avatar, or what people sometimes call the buyer persona, which again many marketers go, all right, well, we're selling to the head of human resources, so that's fine. We'll just write things about human resources without actually taking the time to talk to those people and understand who they are, which is massive. There is the fact that sometimes also content can be extremely boring, and that sometimes B2B bosses rather than marketers think it should be boring, but there's no need for it to be. But the real key, and that's what I was trying to push home, is that if someone receives a message that is interesting to them, then they are going to start that dialogue with your company.
Which brings me to another question that I had for you, Catherine, which is my own personal curiosity, is if you've got like 5 avatars or 5 personas, creating the content that applies to them, obviously you can segment it, but it's an awful lot of effort. And I think people kind of don't necessarily want to do it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's really important that when you're creating your avatars and when you're creating your strategy, you are realistic about what you can achieve. So it's fine to have 5 avatars if you can market to them, in an intelligent way, if you have the scale and the resource to be able to market to all of them, or perhaps they have similarities so that you can align your content that it maybe speaks to 2 avatars rather than just 1. Right. But it is important to not go over the top when you're creating these avatars, and perhaps pick the 2 or the 3 that are the most important for you, especially if you're a small to medium team. I mean, what John was saying about the mass email, I want to go back to that point because I think it's really important. So I use this example all the time, and I really love this example. But marketing that is trying to apply to the masses is like standing in a crowded room of, say, 1,000 people and going, hey, everybody, look at me, look at me. If you've ever done it, if you've ever been one of those street canvassers, you know for a fact that it does not work. What does work is saying, hey, guy in the red shirt, because all the men wearing red shirts in that room will turn around and look at you. The most effective thing you can do in today's world, especially in today's world where it's crowded with content, everybody's turning up content, is to create content that cuts through that noise and resonates with the customer sitting on the other side of the screen, the person reading it. It makes them sit up and go, oh, hey, this brand really understands me. They know what I'm going through. They can help solve my problem. And then, their search for the solution to their problem is over because they have found somebody who can, provide that, who can answer that pain point. And there's nothing more effective than that.
That's a brilliant example. Not the red shirt, the shouting in crowds, something that makes people turn around, grabbing people's attention with something that they relate to and that's important to them. Coming back to you, John, the idea of, the content, I love that. I'd like to talk about the fun aspect, because I really want to insist on the fact that boring content for me is interesting for you, John, for example.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I wouldn't. Let's change that a little bit, because I work with a lot of marketers, but I also work with quite a few different content writers as well. In the sense that certain pieces of content can be written in a kind of language which is stiff and dull, and maybe an internal language where they're talking about their product and using internal words that aren't necessarily going to be relevant to your initial entry level lead. And I think some people are very, very resistant to that. I'm not saying if you've got a site that is talking about semiconductors that you want to go absolutely crazy, but there are people that need to buy semiconductors, and they're going to look up certain things, and there'll be certain themes. But there's no reason, for example, that the language of it can't be a little bit more open, a little bit more relaxed. And I would have thought, Catherine, you deal with this a lot.
Yeah, 100%. As a content marketing agency that specializes in technology, we write on quite a lot of subjects that most people would consider boring, but it's all about making that content relevant. So if you're talking to a CTO that already understands this tech, then you can be a bit more jargon heavy, you can be a bit more technical. But if you're speaking to an audience that does not understand the tech, then you need to be, you need to use plain English terms, you need to be a bit more of that nature. So it's really important to understand who you're talking to and then tailor the content accordingly. So John, if you were talking to somebody who was very corporate, and they went onto the semiconductor website, they would probably want to see very corporate language. But if you were talking to a small business owner or, somebody in the startup scene, somebody who's trying to be quite disruptive, then the language that you use on that website should definitely be fun and playful. But it's about never forgetting who you're talking to. And it's about keeping that front and center, and that should be pivotal to all content that you create and how you communicate in the language that you use and shape your tone of voice. So when we run tone of voice workshops, we spend quite a lot of time talking about that audience, because that audience is going to shape and influence the tone of voice that you use and the words that you use and all of that. It's so important. It always comes back to thinking about that person on the other side of the computer screen and never forgetting that you are talking to one person. In B2B, you get a lot of challenge for, well, we're not talking to one person, we're talking to a corporation, because B2B is business to business. But there's always a decision maker in that business. You are always talking to one person within that business who is your first point of contact. And then that person might need to go up the chain and get, involve other people. But it's still human. It's still human to human rather than, trying to talk to the corporation at large.
Wonderful. Brilliant. We actually have a few questions from the audience, which I'd like to come on to now. Chris Lopez is saying, is it worth being slightly off brand in order to personalize messages? John?
Difficult what you consider to be off. I mean, I'd love him to tell us what he considers to be off brand, because that's a little bit open. Do you know what? As I said, I think, I mean, you've definitely, I mean, lots of the things here we've been talking about, such as you need to know who your target audience are, you need to know what kind of language to have that is going to speak to them. And let's also go into this idea of, and I'm being very B2B here again, apologies if there are B2C people looking at this, is that with B2B, it's not necessarily about traffic, right? It's not necessarily about how much traffic have I got coming into my site, or it's not even necessarily about how many leads have I got coming into my site if those leads are not the people that you want to be speaking to, right? So this brings me to the off-brand idea. Everything that you do should be thought about in terms of the language that you're using, in terms of the messaging that you're using, in terms of the title of whatever piece you're doing needs to speak to your target audience, because that's the thing they're going to see first, and that's what they're going to click on before they go in and have a look at more of the details. So you could do something really crazy and wacky and throw it up on social media, and you're going to get quite a lot of people, but you may have to just then throw all of them away, or you may have to sift them through, or again, lead nurturing is going to help you sift them through. So it's half and half, because you can do sort of massive things, or you could say, hey, man in the red shirt again. I mean, I think that actually, long-term effective B2B marketing is targeted, and beyond, the details of the content and how well that's written and so on and so forth. I mean, those magnets, those things that lead people to you, have to be perfectly written. And again, just at Plezi, we spend hours redoing the titles of our different lead magnets or our paid adverts, because one word off and we suddenly see that all the leads that we're getting are not quite where we should be.
Right. I mean, what I thought immediately when I read that was, you need to use the vocabulary and talk to your audience in a manner that the audience expects. But like in a relationship, don't lose yourself when you're doing it, because you're desperately trying to please everybody else. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure why my camera keeps turning off.
Yeah.
Catherine, please carry on. Help me.
Definitely. I mean, so I would question what you mean by off-brand, because all brands should start at the beginning, should start by thinking about who those customers are. So we do brand messaging workshops, which is a very beginning process of building a website, of building a brand, but from a messaging content perspective. And that always starts with your audience and who you're talking to. And yeah, Jason, I would echo as well that, it's about building those relationships. So good content marketing to me is about creating conversations and building relationships and nurturing those relationships so that somebody can go from not knowing who you are to buying from you and then being an advocate of your brand. And you can't do that if you're trying to appeal to the masses or not thinking about who you're talking to. It'd be like if you went on a date and only talked about yourself. Like, it's not going to work. I don't know if anybody's ever tried it, but trust me, it doesn't work. What is far more effective is starting at the beginning with thinking about who you're talking to and who you want to court. So you are courting prospects rather than trying to convince them to just buy from you. It's more about that relationship and that conversation and supporting them in the right way and building a really nice, collaboration. And John, you're 100% right too about, you don't need thousands of leads in B2B. If you think about a lead as a sale, which it is, most B2B companies operate with, the cost of their item is quite high. So it's not like when you're selling shoes and you have to sell thousands of them to make a profit. In B2B, you need fewer quality sales than you need thousands of sales. So it's more about refining, your SEO strategy so that you're choosing keywords that have the right search intent. And then when you get that lead on your website, nurturing them through the funnel and through the process.
Yeah, and I think it's a mistake a lot of people make when they come into SEO, especially clients who don't really kind of think it all through, is I want volume, I want lots of people. And you're saying, no, what you actually want is the right people. And in B2B, I mean, it's frustrating is that people think, oh, there aren't many people coming to my website. And Johnny, that idea that in fact you're going to get high ticket people as a rule in B2B means that frustration is actually misplaced because you don't need that many people.
Yeah, absolutely, and I mean, these are all your vanity metrics that hit certain marketers when they're trying to justify themselves, and the other ones can be, I'm doing this for the brand message. This is why I want to put this on LinkedIn, or this is why I want to do this article. It's all about building our brand and so on and so forth. But if it's not actually creating any business that you can measure or see, it really is, again, it's vanity, and it's just to say to the boss somewhere, but look, we did this article and it's really good for our brand. It needs to have a follow through, it needs to have a reason as to why it's there, and it needs to be measured actually.
All right, and in French, a raison d'etre, as we say. We have a question from Dominic Rowe, which I like because it takes the offline as well. As a recruitment agency, we send postcards to clients and candidates as a form of personalization. Could you recommend any other ways we could heighten this personalization, Catherine?
Yeah, well, I mean, taking things offline and sending things to people's homes is a very effective way because you're communicating with them on a different channel. But I would want to know what was in that postcard. So I would want to know what you were saying to them because, a blanket mail drop across thousands is the same as sending a mass email. So I would want to know, what does that postcard say? Is it a handwritten postcard that really talks about how happy you are to work with them? Or is it like a computer typed out postcard that says the same exact thing to thousands of people? So I think it's less about the postcard and more about the messaging within that postcard. What I would recommend is thinking about your content across all channels, whether it's social or offline or online, and making sure that content aligns with customer personas and customer avatars and customer pain points, and that you understand who you're talking to regardless of, how you're actually sending those messages out.
Sure. I mean, I think kind of what I hear as well is don't forget the offline, but don't think the offline is any more simple than the online. And those shortcuts, John and Catherine, I think what I heard there was lots of possible shortcuts that people take. And it's very tempting, but probably a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do think there's power in doing some offline things or some quirky things like that. I would, again, rather than sort of doing that to lots of people, I I would maybe sort of really personalize it and make sure that it's just single things that you were doing offline, which was really written to that one person. I think that would really personalize it. But it comes back to what we said. Those things are nice. And it's important to treat people where they feel special about your brand and so on. But there needs to be a line through. It needs to. It can't just be one thing that is. Well, we do this one cute thing. There needs to be a line throughout. And that, as Catherine said, that's going to follow through. That should be on your social. That should be on your LinkedIn. It should be everywhere, actually.
Yeah, it makes me think of something that happened this morning. In fact, I receive lots of people who say, "Oh, I want to be on your podcast," and you can see they've just copy pasted a template pitch. And my daughter actually said to me, "You should just reply, we're not interested in your square bracket template," which I kind of thought was fun. I'm not going to do it. But what I think we fail to realize as marketers is we hate to be templated at.
Yeah.
And yet we sometimes template. Catherine.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, marketers are in a tough position because they try to do so much with so little. So most of the tech companies we work with run with really lean teams. So that means that they might only have 1 or 2 people in their marketing department. So when you're trying to market at scale, it's very hard to keep it focused on the customer, keep personalizing it if you don't have, lots of time. So I think it's about being smart and, having the right technology to support you so that some of those more tedious tasks, like the workflow, you don't necessarily have to do. It can be automated, it can be manually done, and then you can focus on building those customer relationships and really applying the human skills where the human skills excel, and allowing technology to take over in areas where perhaps you're not needed.
Well, I love that. I mean, using technology to actually get rid of the difficult, the very repetitive work, focusing on the human being. I love that. And talking about human beings, personas, we're back to personas. I mean, somebody, Naif Asofiana, or Annie, excuse me, I'm terribly bad with names, is asking, is it confusing to have 2 personas that have similarities? I mean, I think they're saying, if you have multiple personas that are too similar, do you get confused and mess it all up?
No, that's definitely not. I mean, it's good to have some overlap because then you can create pieces of content that might speak to 2, but it's worth wondering, how different are they? Is it just the job title that's different, or are there other things that are different about them? And perhaps if it's just something like a job title, you can combine it so you can have one avatar that speaks to and captures the essence of both. So I guess I would wonder, how similar are they? And what it comes down to for me is actually the essence of somebody. So the pain points, the psychological triggers, the emotional state that they're in, all of that kind of thing is far more important than male, female, demographics, age, that kind of top level thing. It's more about getting beneath the surface, digging deep, really thinking about what it is that's keeping them up at night. What are they worried about? And what's going to happen to them if that situation comes true? And then how can you position yourself to solve that problem? And, positioning yourself to solve that problem makes you a headache reliever rather than a vitamin. And if you're a headache reliever, people have to take advantage of what you're offering today. They can't wait. They can't wait till tomorrow. They can't wait till next budget review. They have to do it today. So it's so effective to think about those psychological triggers, to dig deep and dig beneath the surface and make sure that that is what's captured rather than top level things like, location or age or job title.
So the persona is all about kind of what's going to trigger them emotionally or psychologically, rather, with regards to your product.
Yeah, because then you can figure out what to say to them. So if you know the state that somebody's in emotionally, psychologically, then you can figure out what you need to say to them to convince them to trust you.
Right. Okay. Because I think a lot of people approach personas and then personalization by, as you say, job title and location. John, that presumably is a big mistake from what Catherine's saying.
You definitely. I mean, there's no end to the questions you can ask in terms of creating a persona. But and I agree with everything Catherine said there. I would add, from the tech perspective, the thing that you also really want to find out, which is sort of massively important for you as a marketer, is what they're on, what channels they're on, there's no point crafting your messages if your personas don't go to the places where your messages are. So that's massively important. But again, that can kind of get wider than just the stuff you're talking about. What social media are you on? What things do you like to read? What things do you like to listen to? What podcasts do you listen to? But also, it can become wider if you start to think about it culturally, so that you can really, again, try to understand who that person is. There's still a bit of job title, age, and all that sort of stuff. That does come into it too.
Okay, so I was overdoing it and taking that all too literally. We have an interesting concept now with Rocket, who's asking what's the best way? And basically the question is, can you give us some handy hints about how to A/B test? Because once you start writing those messages, pushing them out to personas, obviously you need to figure out if it's working or not. Catherine, handy hints on A/B testing, figuring out which message is working?
Yeah, well, I think marketing is all about testing, reviewing results, and then refining. So I see marketing as this constant iteration of putting something out there, reviewing the results, gathering insights, and then refining what you're doing. So, you have to start somewhere. And even if, where you start is not where you end up, you start at this point, and then you have to track and monitor. And when you're doing that, that reveals further opportunities. So you can kind of finesse this and, get that messaging to a point that it does really resonate and that results do shine through. So I think a lot of people think of marketing as like a silver bullet, and it's not. It's about learning and developing and being curious and not being afraid to explore new angles and to go a step further and constantly pushing. And by constantly pushing, you get to an end result that is really amazing.
Right, and what I heard there as well is I immediately said A/B testing, and I kind of think maybe I was just immediately thinking that ambitious thing of having two sets and seeing which one works. And you're saying actually it's an iterative process where I don't need all this technology to set up A/B split testing in emails. I can actually send an email, see how it works, then send another email to the same group of people and see how that works.
That's certainly how I see it. But yeah, of course, there's lots of different approaches to it.
No, sorry. I was saying I was overdoing it, and I think we often make that mistake.
It goes beyond that in a way, Jason, in the sense that again, if you've got content on your site, if you've got landing pages on your site, again, you're going to constantly be looking at how well is that converting, how well is that doing, what kind of leads am I getting from that. So it does become more than A/B testing in the sense that a marketer is always improving and fine tuning and so on. Let's not forget though, that's goes back to some of those other things. When you're sending out an email, the title of your email is huge, and there's ways you can refine and get that right and make that better. And the other, and this kind of hits on Catherine's point about creativity. I really enjoyed myself. I really enjoyed Louis Grenier, who talks a lot about sort of radical differentiation in B2B marketing. There is something to be said for trying a kind of an idea that you haven't tried before at all. I mean, that's part of the fun if you can start to get creative and see what kind of results it gets. But it has to be measured. I've said that many times this webinar, haven't I?
Yeah, no, and obviously don't put all your eggs in one basket and do one entire strategy around one test.
Right.
It's a test as part of an overall strategy. I think one question that I can almost feel coming from the audience that they haven't actually asked, but I'm going to ask anyway, is for smaller companies. I mean, a lot of people work for smaller companies. Making a small budget, go a long way in terms of content creation and pushing that out in a personalized manner. Catherine, have you got some ideas for smaller companies?
Yeah, I think content marketing is an incredibly effective way to do it. So it's proven that SEO is more cost effective than only doing paid advertising and PPC. Content also allows you to kind of scale that relationship. So rather than having lots of salespeople on the ground who can go out and speak to these people, creating content that answers prospects' questions and having that on your website helps streamline it. So I see content as a very effective way of doing more with less and building that momentum. And obviously, as we know, with organic traffic, once you build that momentum and get that snowball going, I always explain it that like organic is a bit like building a snowball at the top of the hill. You build that snowball and you push it down. And as it starts going, it builds momentum until it can almost roll by itself. And it becomes this really beautiful churning machine that sends you lots of really high quality leads. So I think, investing in content and SEO, but then again, of course, I would say that.
I would also add to it that I think within that, because I speak to a lot of people that are that want to begin doing content marketing and so on, and that they say, I don't have the resources, or I don't have the time, or it's just going to be too much. Yeah, but it's I think also, I don't want to do you out of a job, Catherine, but I think also that they that a lot of the time they don't realize that they already have content online. They don't realize that actually some of their brochure, some of the things that is on their site can be reformatted and made into a piece of content, actually. Or that if they went for one big piece of content, that they can redo that as an infographic, that they can redo that as a webinar, that they can redo that as smaller articles, that they can chop it up and do some social media with that as well. It's endless, and I totally agree with you. It is the most cost effective in terms of creating leads, in terms of creating traffic. It's a long term strategy, but it's way more effective than paid for ads in Google or paid for ads within social media.
Yeah. Have you got any advice for people who've got an impatient boss or client who's saying, I want results tomorrow?
That is a hard one.
It is,
right?
Isn't it?
In the sense, you would need to do, you will, well, yeah, okay, I do have advice.
Great.
I would say, and it's what everybody did this year. Which we've seen. Yeah, I mean, there's every single website has done it, and we're doing it right now. It's do a webinar. Absolutely. It's exactly like doing an event. If the subject matter is interesting, you're gonna start to see people engaging with your site and with what you're doing. It's a really effective way of quickly creating leads, and then again, if you can then keep their interest and keep them on your site, you're starting to do something really interesting. So, webinars, podcasts are interesting. All those kind of things are normally going to bring some people into your site, and that's the beginning, really, of you starting your strategy.
Right. Okay, Catherine, for smaller budgets.
Yeah, I mean, for the quick win. So I would add that it's about planning a strategy that has the long-term gains as well as a quick win. So, when I'm saying that SEO is far more effective, cost-effective than PPC, I'm not saying don't do PPC. You might want to do PPC in the short term while SEO works in the long run. And it's about having two mindsets constantly going, how can I get results today? And how can I get results over the long term? And then making sure that you adjust that dial as needed. So yes, content may be, a long-term game, but there are things like content dissemination that you can do today. So sharing on social, going to the places where your customers already are and engaging with them there, sharing the content by email in lots of different formats to repurpose it to please that small budget, but then also to start to see results today, now, and get that quick wins as well as a long-term strategy. So I think a good marketer needs to think in both of those terms and not just focus on just a long or just a short. Both could be disastrous.
Wonderful, brilliant.
Let me just add to this, because it's something that again is often forgotten in terms of content and so on. But let's take the webinar example. It's not something that just sits there and then you've got a whole bunch of leads, and then it's actually something that works for you in the long term. I mean, we talk a lot about like a virtuous circle of what content does. It can be a webinar, but it could be a white paper. It can be anything, in the sense that if you've got a piece of content, you're going to promote it and you're going to ask people to go and have a look at it. And then they're going to come on it and they're going to transform into leads. But the promotion doesn't end there. It carries on. It keeps on working for you. It works for you in terms of building up traffic. You can use it on your paid. It still works for you even after it's created. So it's a long-term strategy, but it can also, you can do quick wins with it, but it will carry on working for you after that as well.
Brilliant. Okay, I wanted just to end with Elliot Sabag's talking about the fact that they've had to adapt. The current situation is actually going to be the ongoing situation to a greater or lesser extent. How do you think things are going to evolve moving forward, Catherine? Obviously, we've all been locked up for a year now. That's going to be less, but it's still going to be something we need to deal with.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's a lot that's come out of this last year. And I think when we're talking about personalization, what's come out of this last year is the empathy behind marketing. So, making sure that you message to your customers in a way that they want to hear, bringing your messaging online. So, I mean, all of us are kind of stuck in our houses. We're spending more time online, and brands that weren't already digital first are realizing the importance of it. So I think what's happened over the last year is kind of fueling a natural evolution. So all of these trends were kind of there before, and now they're coming to the forefront even more. So, I mean, you need to think about where your customers are, and most of your customers are now going to be online. You need to be more personal. You need to be hyper personalized, if you like. You need to be more empathetic, and you need to be helping to guide your customers through this. So if we think of customers as a relationship, then it's your job to help your customers transition to the new normal, as much as I hate that term, to help them pave the road for recovery and help them get to a brighter day, get their businesses back up and running, recover, rebound. As brands, we almost have a responsibility to share the education, the insights that we have to help people do that.
Wonderful. John?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely Catherine's right on the empathy and the human side. I think it was as I said at the beginning of the presentation, a lot of people spoke about it at the turn of the year and use this phrase personalization, but I think what they're really saying is speak to me like a human being, show empathy, show interest in what I'm interested in, and I think that should really be at the key to what everybody's doing. Be very careful with your messages. I mean, that's really what we're saying, because if you can, I would say keep a certain amount of yourself, right? Keep a certain amount of your humanity when you're sending those messages. But also, make sure that what you're sending is important and relevant to those people.
Brilliant. Wonderful. Right. Do you want to quickly take this last question, Catherine, from Luis Brugera? What percentage of your budget will you put on long-term efforts and short-term efforts?
Yeah, well, I think it depends on where you already are. So how I think of long-term versus short-term is if you're getting started from ground zero, you don't have any SEO traction, you don't have any organic acquisition going on, then you'll want to put more on PPC. You want to put more on the short-term, on those leads. But as you get going, you can kind of adjust that so that you're not always spending lots of money on PPC. You can adjust and refine. So I think it's a very hard question to give an answer without understanding the context of where a brand might be and, what's going on, what they've done in terms of marketing and what they want to achieve, who they're attracting. I think it very much depends on the individual brand and the circumstance that they find themselves in.
Right, I think kind of in relation, sorry, I'll let you finish off there, John, but in relationship to what we're living through at the moment, short-term survival, long-term growth and development. And a lot of companies are simply trying to survive. So I think kind of you've got to look at where can you put your budget, which will help you to survive, to actually have the longer-term opportunities. John, excuse me, I'm sorry.
I would sort of only flip it in the sense that, again, you can simply do content, or you can simply do inbound marketing with sort of 2 to 3 pieces of content, and you can use that within your paid to get instant results, and you can start to do that thing where you are actually having what we're talking about. Let's go back to that, to being human, right, or to this situation or the new normal or whatever. Inbound marketing or content marketing is actually just engaging in a relationship. Just even these phrases like marketing or content or things like that, or automation, but actually, what it is actually engaging in a relationship, and taking that relationship on a journey. You need to think of it in those terms. I would say that you can be surprised what could be considered short term, what can be considered long term. Some of the stuff you're putting on LinkedIn is actually long term because it doesn't go away. It's there for your brand all the time. If you're putting interesting content, which is on your site on LinkedIn as well, that's going to build your brand for a long time. If you're doing paid LinkedIn or paid Facebook with content that is interesting to your target market, that content will pay off for you straight away. So that you can start engaging in a longer term thinking and get some quick wins from them.
Brilliant. That's a beautiful way to describe short and long term and wrap up this delightful webinar. Thank you very much, John and Catherine. Thank you to the audience who are watching. That was amazing. Don't forget, for the audience, you can watch this back again. It's going to stay on YouTube. The slide deck will be available, I'm sure, afterwards. And I'm sure you all want to join me in thanking Catherine and John. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason, as
Thank
well.
you.
Thank you for everyone who joined us.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers, Catherine.
That was awesome. I thought it was brilliantly interesting and wonderfully informative, and I'm terribly happy to have spent an hour and 5 minutes with you two. Thank you very much. See you soon, everybody.
Thanks a lot.